Hello and welcome back. It's June 2025 and Adobe's just released some new updates to Photoshop and Lightroom. And in this short video, we'll take a quick look at the important new updates in Lightroom and discuss whether they're worthwhile or not. As you know, in a couple of our previous videos, we've looked at some of these updates and they've not all been as good as they were hyped up to be. But let's find out and let's jump in. So what's new in Adobe Lightroom Classic as of June 2025? And we're looking at version 14.4. So if your system hasn't been updated, I suggest you go into the Creative Cloud app, update that, and then you'll have these new features available to you. So there are a couple of enhancements that are important for us to have a look at, and we'll cover these briefly. Firstly, in the Removal Tools section of the system, we have a couple of enhancements for distraction removal, and these were available in Camera Raw in a beta version not that long ago, and they've now made their way into the full version of Lightroom. But probably of more importance to most people is the enhancements to the denoise and sharpening that Adobe claims now to be much improved, and we'll have a quick look at that. But the most important thing is that we no longer need to make a digital negative of the file before we can apply the denoise to it. So if I come out of that and come back into our details section, you'll see now that we've got a new feature here called denoise. We have raw details and super resolution. I haven't really had a look at the super resolution version in this version as yet, but still the topaz upsizing seems to be a much better option. But then we have some the sharpening as we previously had in Lightroom. So let's firstly have a look at how the denoise works and how effective that is. So I'm going to choose an image that was pretty poor to start with. Let's go back to this one, which was shot at 6400 ISO in interior in a building, and I've zoomed into 100%, and you can see that there's a terrible amount of noise in it, and it's in fact not perfectly sharp either. Let's just pop back to 50%. We can see that a little bit better. Yeah, it's pretty ordinary. So what I've got now is we'll go into make a version of this in Lightroom so that I can apply those settings. This is completely unimproved, so if I just make a virtual copy, we can then apply the new settings to it. So here we are, no settings applied. We go down to the detail section, tick the box that says denoise, and you'll see that it does take a little bit of time to process, which is quite normal for any of these denoising programs, and we'll see how good a job it does in removing that really nasty noise. This, as I said, was 6400 ISO, so it's quite noisy, but can we recover the image from this? Let's just see what happens once it works its way through. Nothing like watching a progress bar move along. Well, here we are. You can see here, if I turn that off, I'll hold down the mouse button to turn that off, and you can see that's the before and that's the after, and it certainly seems to have brought back some other details in there. And then of course we could go ahead and apply our sharpening. Now I've previously done this with using topaz, and I know that I need to really crank up the sharpening amount and the masking pretty high on this one so that we get a decent amount of sharpening. But you can see in this image, if I zoom back to normal, it looks sharp enough here, but when we zoom in, if we go to 100%, it's not quite perfectly sharp. But let's just pop back to 50% and have a look at the version with using Photo AI. And of course, if we use Topaz Photo AI, we have to produce a TIFF file before we move into the software. So there is that process involved, but it certainly does a pretty good job of comparison. So if I just look at those two side by side, let's just go back to the library module. You can see there that on the left is the Photo AI version, on the right is the Lightroom version. The Lightroom version actually looks a little sharper at this point. So that's a real win for Lightroom at this point. But then if I went into use Photo AI plus their super focus option, and let's have a look at that. This is the super focus option on Topaz AI, and obviously you can control the amount that it's applied to the image, but you can see here quite clearly it seems to have recovered a lot more detail. Maybe there's a little bit of texture in there that probably wasn't in the existing one, but when you bear in mind that this was carved from a walrus tusk, it's in ivory, so that there's going to be a lot of fairly small gritty detail in it, and this seems to be a pretty good option. So at this point, Lightroom and Topaz AI look pretty even, and either one does a pretty good job. Okay, so that's one example. Let's have a look at another example that is not out of focus, because at this point, if the images were both equally focused, I'd say there was virtually no difference between the two. But having that option for super focus in Topaz, if your focusing point is a little bit out, that's an enhancement that I think is worthwhile having. So let's have a look now at another example, and we'll go back to single view. So we've got this. This was just a handheld shot of a flower at 2000 ISO. If we zoom in, we can see, yeah, there's a fair bit of noise in that. What can we do to enhance that? So I've already done all this once, so I won't make you watch that little progress bar go through again. But if we look at this one, this is the raw file without the denoising. And let's have a look at, this is the version with denoise. Probably better if I just leave it back in the library module and we can compare side by side. That is probably the way to go. So if I look at those two, we've got on the left, we've got the copy that has the Lightroom denoise applied, and the right hand side is just the original raw file with no denoise applied anywhere. And you can see here that there's quite a lot of small gritty detail here, but it's certainly not a disaster, and the denoise in Lightroom together with the sharpening has certainly made a much better job. But let's then compare that with the noise reduction in Photo AI. So let's just compare those two. It always becomes a problem when you're trying to multiple select images. So if we have our Photo AI, let's go back and make sure we've got the right one. This is the one with the denoise applied. No, it's not. This is the one with the denoise applied. This is what happens when you have multiple copies and multiple virtual copies. You end up with a lot of different versions. And let's go back to library so we know exactly what we're working with, and then we have the Photo AI version there, and we can compare the two. So on the left is the one using Lightroom's denoise and sharpening, and the one on the right is using Photo AI denoise and sharpening. And I'd say, look, there's pretty much no difference. I'd say in this case, Adobe's improvements have been well worthwhile, and in most instances you wouldn't need to go to Topaz to get a decent result. And of course, I'm looking at some fairly extreme examples. Other examples might be a little simpler. So let's look at one that's probably not a really difficult image to work with. And I've got an example here of the city skyline in Edinburgh, and I've previously used this as an example. We're zoomed in here at what are we zoomed into? 50%. Let's have a look at the Photo AI version as well, and we'll just see what the comparison looks like when we look at the two together. And this was not at a particularly high ISO. It was 400. It was, you know, an overcast day, but not terribly bad. So this one we're looking at on the left is the raw file with the sharpening and denoising applied. Let's just get to that antenna there. And this is on the right is the Topaz version. Again, not very much difference between them. So I think we can conclude, at least at this point, Lightroom's made a big step forward now. We don't have that messy way of having to create a separate DNG file and then having the worry of trying to work out which was the original, which was the copy. And we can go ahead and do this denoising directly on the raw file. It's editable and it's adjustable. And of course, I didn't mention here that on the denoise version that I've applied, we also have a slider for the amount, and we can actually control the amount of denoise that's applied. I've just left it at its default at this point, but you can in fact move this up and down when the computer wants to play ball, and you can increase it or decrease it to taste. So at this point, the denoise and sharpening in Lightroom seems to have made quite a decent step forward. Yes, so that the denoise amount can be controlled from this slider so that we can take it back to 0. And let's just zoom back into 100% because we'll see that detail a little more clearly here. So basically that's no denoise applied. 50 is the default setting. We can see that it certainly made a difference. And if we went all the way to 100, it would probably be a little bit too much. So let's just bring that back to 50. And then we'll be able to work with what we've got. And if I hold that down, there's not a huge amount of noise in this one. I have applied the sharpening to it, but for any images that are not at a particularly high ISO, I think the Lightroom version of the denoise is now quite acceptable, does a very good job, and we don't need to go around to Topaz. But for other instances where you need some other further enhancements, I certainly still think Topaz is worth having. But if you've only got the budget for one, then I'd stick with the Lightroom version for now. So let's have a look now at the other things that have been improved or enhanced in Lightroom. And this is a bit of a funny one because this is the remove people option, or the removal tool. I'll have a quick look at this one. I've actually made this image and processed this image using the generative fill in Photoshop, but let's see if it'll help find us the offending people in the image. I wanted to have a nice clean picture here, and it's made a selection pretty well of all of the people in the image, although it's included in the area here that's not involving people. It's picked that up, but let's just let it do its thing. And of course we let it do the selection, and then we can just let it process, because we can either decide to delete some areas before we do this, or we can delete them afterwards. It doesn't matter. It's editable after the fact. So what we can do now is have a look and see what's happened. Well, it certainly removed the people, but here's the thing. We've got a bit of an issue here with how it's filled in the area between the people. Now if I turn that off, you'll see those people reappear in the image, and what's happened is it's removed the people and filled in the areas. Let's just turn that off again. It's filled in the areas, but it hasn't really replicated the texture terribly well, and so we've got this rather nasty boundary. So let's go back and get rid of all of that and just look at how if we just did it one person at a time. So let's just let it find those people, and if we want to exclude an area, it tells us here, click on the pin and use the delete key. So let's get rid of all but this one chap here, or these two people here. So I'll click on the pin, hit the delete key. Those people are now excluded. That's now excluded, and this little funny here area here is excluded. Let's just see if the processing power of the generative remove has been overwhelmed by too many options. So let's just click on remove and see what it does. Hopefully it'll give us a better result this time, but let's see. So it's removed them, and this time it's certainly a better job, but you can see here that the resolution isn't great. It's gone a little bit soft. So I have a version here where I did the removal using Photoshop and the generative fill. Now we don't want the people removal turned on. Thank you very much. This is the version I made previously, and you can see that the generative AI in Photoshop has done a pretty good job of preserving the texture, whereas back in Lightroom, it's not been fantastic. I think in some cases it'll work quite well, but if you have a larger area to remove, it's going to struggle a little bit to maintain the level of detail in the image. So that sort of works, and it sort of works okay, but if you want a better quality result, I think at this stage you still need to go to Photoshop and use the generative AI tools there. But let's just go back for 1 minute and just have a look at this, because we do have a couple of options that we can try and play around with. Now this is the only one. To regenerate an area, well, let's just have a look at this. Now that I've done this, well, what we're going to have to do is go back to remove that and start again. Distraction removal, people, it's chosen all of those. Let's just click on remove again and let it do its thing. And I think that the problem is that the software can only handle the resolution up to a certain level, and beyond that it gets a little bit beyond it. And it's interesting to see here that I've got a rope through here, and I didn't notice this before, but the rope has only partially disappeared. Now we can remove that manually using some of the other tools under the remove section, as we've previously used the patch tool or the remove tool. But for this example, we're really just concerned with this overall remove tool, and it's still not giving me the sort of results that we want, but we can regenerate if we don't like the results, which is what I was going to get back to. And if you find that you've tried this removal and it's not giving you a perfect result, yeah, that's maybe a little bit better. And you'll see here that we have a couple of different options available to us. That one's no good. The third one, yeah, let's go back to version 1, and that's maybe a little better. So maybe with a little bit more playing around you will find a result, but of course you will still get this little problem where you've removed something and the background hasn't been completely repaired. So you might want to do this sort of an option where you remove them using one of these tools, and we'll see if it'll do the job. If not, we'll have to use some of the other tools. Now for some reason my computer's slowed right down, and it's using that to replicate an area and basically clone it across, and that's probably okay. In that case, it's done a reasonable job. So it's improved. It's not perfect, but it's getting much better. Let's just go back to fit to the window, and we can see, yep, we've still got that rope there, but that's certainly done a better job. So finally, let's just have a quick look at the options for removing reflections. Now, again, this is part of the remove tools, and what I've done is I'll just come back to what I had previously before I did this. This was photographed through a window, and the reflection removal tool only really applies to photographing through glass. It doesn't affect things like reflections in tabletops and things like that, but in fact, in most cases, it does a pretty good job. So let's just come down to here, distraction removal. Nothing happens until you tick on apply, and it will go away and apply that, and you'll see that it's done a pretty good job. And we also have a slider here to control the amount of the effect. So if I go all the way back to 0, what it's showing me here is just purely the reflections that it's found. This bit here, this bit here and these sections. So if I just go all the way back up to 100, you'll see that it's done a very good job of removing those reflections. So in this instance, this works pretty well. You'll see that it doesn't affect these areas, and I've tried this in a couple of locations and it seems to work pretty well. This one, we had much worse reflections here. We go to the same thing, reflections, click on apply, and it's done a pretty reasonable job, although when we zoom in we can see there that let's just go back to 50%. It's not quite perfect in this area. It's somehow try to recreate some detail. So I mean, on the original there was no detail there. It was pretty awful. So let's just go back out again, turn that off. You can see that there was almost no detail, and it's done a pretty good job. And I think we're probably asking for perfection, and we're getting something close to it, but not quite there. But it certainly makes an image that would be usable. So I hope all that's been useful. We'll have a further look at some of the other new enhancements a little bit further down the track. But thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.